As a reminder, hiring people is the same as sales. Our agency, when we're selling, our final meeting with the prospect is to review the contract in person because I want to see facial expressions. I want to understand like where there are hesitations as we're going through the terms and conditions. And the same is true with the offer letter, right? Welcome back to the Sterling Family Law Show. I am your host, Tyler Dolph. I'm also the CEO of our family law firm only marketing agency that was born out of our own law firm, Sterling Lawyers, that has grown to over 27 attorneys. Today, we are concluding our hiring series. This episode is entitled The Offer Letter, but it is not as easy as simply just sending the offer letter. There is a lot that is involved, and we break that down for you here. And it's not the episode could be like 1 minute. Send the offer letter, wait to get it signed back. But there's actually much more involved than just simply sending the offer letter. So JP, give us just a timeline, right? So you have this final interview. After the final interview is over, what's our process to get that signed offer letter at the end?
Yeah, so obviously you're going to want to debrief with the stakeholders, the hiring manager, your head of people operations, any other key leadership team members who are involved. You're going to want to validate the hire. We have a saying we've bandied around internally. If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Like you want to be really confident by this point, but you've had an operational interview, you've had a culture interview, you've got a really good chance to get aligned with this person on what they're stepping into from a value standpoint. So you should be able to within just a few days, make a decision on whether this is the right person for the role and whether you want to move forward. And at that point, what you don't do is just send them an offer letter. What you should do is schedule a follow-up conversation with the person who's going to be leading this to talk through what it looks like to take next steps to join your company, because you want to lock down expectations, timelines, give them space to ask any questions, and make sure that you are fully in agreement as you move forward.
Yes, as a reminder, hiring people is the same as sales. And at our agency, when we're selling, our final meeting with the prospect is to review the contract in person because I want to see facial expressions. I want to understand like where there are hesitations as we're going through the terms and conditions. And the same is true with the offer letter, right?
100%. Yeah, and for the family law firm owners that are listening, we probably don't have all the roles that JP rattled off, depending on the size of our firm. So, like, you're really working with, if they're going to be working with a paralegal. So if it's a smaller firm, it's probably you and like which paralegal are they going to working with, and what's the peer that they're going to have internally, the attorney peer that they're going to have that you really respect. If you have a managing partner, they should be the one signing off on it in this process as well. So like there's the players are going to look different, but it's literally the same process. You're going to want to get perspective, up, sideways, and down in terms of like how the team feels about the person coming in, especially for an attorney, because they're integrated in so many different ways in a law firm, which is different than an agency. When we hire a paid search person, they're really kind of just functioning with their department, with their own peers. There's not a whole lot of like interaction with sales, for instance. There's, it's pretty limited in terms of where they're scoped. So it's important to like include other people in the firm in the vetting process, because like you're building a culture, and you're either going to create a potential issue or you're going to reinforce what you're trying to build with the feedback from your team.
100%. Let's transition into hiccups or roadblocks that we have encountered during the offer process. Either maybe they got a counteroffer from their current, firm, or they want to extend out the timeline to when they transition, or they, the compensation, there was a misalignment. JP, give us some of those roadblocks and how to get over them.
Yeah, so obviously there's a bunch of factors to consider here. If they're currently working somewhere, if they're currently employed, hopefully you found out early in the process why they're leaving. And what you talk through with them is how the pain that they're experiencing today, whether that's around compensation, growth opportunity, culture, is being addressed in this move. You want to reinforce that. Hey, you told us that one of the things you're really looking for in your next position is, and we've talked about, how do you feel like that's going to be solved here? Do you feel like this is Like, you want to hear them own the fact that they're moving towards something they want, because that's going to help them if they get a counteroffer, to help them say, no, I'm committed. This is the right decision. So that's a big one that helps get rid of some of those roadblocks you talked about around counteroffers. Timelines, you do want to have an expectation of when this person needs to start and give an appropriate notice. I will say that it's generally a good sign if the person you're hiring is employed currently and is giving a substantial notice to their current employer. That's a good sign they're going to do it for you too. So that's not necessarily a red flag if they're saying, hey, I want to give 2, 3, 4 weeks. I'd love to start with you in 30 days. That's pretty reasonable. If they're giving you, 60, 90 days or something like that, it's probably worth digging into. Is there something else going on? Another thing you could consider is like talking about timelines and bringing them on. Is there something in that starting period which is going to create a hiccup to their onboarding? Oh, I've got a big 2-week vacation planned to Tahiti to celebrate my 20th anniversary a week after I start. All right, well, I don't really want to start you and then have you immediately out for 2 weeks. That's going to make it really hard for me to get you ramped up quickly. Like, you want to try to uncover those things. Any concerns that are going to come up in the first 30, 60 days, vacations, trips, surgeries, anything going on that they know about and can tell you, you're trying to like pull that out. And then, of course, like, I'm going to set aside compensation because that's its own whole conversation. But you do want to be aligned on expectations in terms of the whole compensation package that you're discussing. And again, this gets back to like, understanding what they're leaving, what they're looking for in their next opportunity, what they're coming from. So those are some places that can kind of backfire on you that we've seen, and how we try to get ahead of them. You want to be proactive in solving those.
Hey, family law firm leaders. My partner, Tony Carls, just released his book where he lays bare our precise blueprint for growing Sterling lawyers from 0 to 17 million. This is the blueprint that we still use daily. And Tony explains it in very simple terms. The truth is, this is not simple to do. Success requires and demands hard work, but if you have the patience and the work ethic to do it, your family law firm will succeed.
If we're gonna transition to the compensation piece, I think there's some important things here. It's real easy to start a team member and with a bad taste in their mouth because you aggressively negotiated with them on their salary, and now they're disgruntled already, and they haven't even started working with you. Because if they're running away from something that is painful and you've just given them a different version of that pain through like an aggressive negotiation, that's typically not a good thing. Like, it might feel good that you won the negotiation, but you're probably setting yourself up for a conversation that's going to probably come out of nowhere in a relatively short period of time. We typically take the tact. We're very transparent on our compensation model and what expectations are at different levels within our business. So, in a law firm, you just need to be super clear with what your compensation model is, how that impacts their salary, how it impacts their bonus potential, what the expectations are, what are the timelines to get there from an expectations perspective, what are the consequences of not hitting that in terms of how that changes. Because what you want to see from them this is why you want to present this. You want to see from them what are the nonverbals you're getting from them. Because, maybe you post the position at $120,000, they're negotiating for $160,000, and now you have a $40,000 gap that you got to figure out what are you going to do with to retain this talent that you really want. And if you're super transparent up front about here's how the monetary part of our practice works and what the expectations are as it pertains to this, really doesn't matter what your salary is if there's very clear alignment on performance expectations from a production perspective, because typically attorneys have very high vested interest in what they're bringing to the firm from an overall revenue perspective and how that impacts their overall compensation. So, like, if that's very clear and transparent on how that works, it might not be an issue. But if you're kind of hiding it, or it's not clear, or it's kind of ambiguous, there isn't good tracking, there's not good reporting, you very well might be setting yourself up for a frustrating coaching conversation that is going to feel like it's coming out of nowhere for the team member. So I think being very transparent and not my personal perspective is I don't take a tact of negotiating. I let them set their own bed and then set very clear expectations of what that bed means in terms of what they're getting ready to lie down in. Because I don't want people to come in and feel disgruntled at the front end. And typically, if you get to this point and you haven't started having this type of conversation already, you're already behind the eight ball. This should be one of the things that you're asking about in the culture interview in terms of salary expectations. So that way you're setting yourself up well for this conversation, not because you're trying to figure out how to negotiate and position yourself, but you're already coming to the place of, all right, I went through 3 different interviews. I like this person. They fit a range that I was okay with, and now I'm going to make that a real offer. And like, here's what that real offer means for the candidate.
That's great. What have you done in the past if there is a misalignment on salary? They want 160, the job's at 120. How have you closed that gap?
So there's obviously a lot of ways that you can close the gap. One way is if the gap was that big, I wouldn't do this. So if we were to like shrink that gap to 10,000, one of the things that I would highly consider is creating part of their salary as a sign-on bonus that's paid out over the first year of their employment, especially if it's an attorney and their base compensation is based on their production from a revenue perspective, because it's going to be very easy for them to exceed that if it's clear what their performance objectives are. If they don't hit it, now there's an easy level down from as that annualizes to the next year, because it's a sign-on bonus that's paid out over the course of that first year. So like there's some safeguards there. If it was 40,000, it's a pretty large gap, I would say. That needs to be more of a career conversation in terms of like, here's where we are. This is how we think about responsibility. This is what would need to be achieved from a business perspective to get there. How do we work through that? And that would be more of a collaborative conversation in terms of how are they going to help the business get to the place where that type of compensation for an individual team member is possible. So like how basically it's how are you going to help us grow the business conversation so that we can make this right. And like, if we don't hit these objectives, this is what the consequence will be, blah, 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 those types of things.
I love it. Yeah. So it is simply not just sending the offer letter. It is walking them through, ensuring that everyone is aligned on what is expected, as well as, how they're going to impact the firm. I think we should do another episode on onboarding, because that's just as important, right? Everyone comes in with their culture battery all the way full. And if you can create a good 30, 60, 90 day onboarding plan for your employees, you're going to ensure that culture battery stays full and that they don't have any buyer's remorse in leaving their old firm and coming to this. Gentlemen, really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed this series. Looking forward to the next one.